All right, so in this recording, I got some commentary that I'm gonna call road rules. Now, I'm gonna start off with this. Growing up as a child into my teenage years, I really enjoyed motorcycles. Like there was a lot of appeal about a motorcycle. It's such a stark contrast from a car. And then I think what makes it appealing too, especially during the times that I was growing up, bikes are like a rite to passage. You start off, there's already bikes made for you to encounter, and like you get acquainted with that concept early because they have training wheels, they have tricycles. So it's built to kind of assist you through these different stages in life. And then you see adults riding bikes and cyclists. That's a sport. They're Olympic cyclists or something like that. You're like, wow, biking really goes through all these stages in the progression of growing as a person. So when you encounter the concept of a motorcycle, it just seems dope. Probably the design and appearance and look of the motorcycle is a big part of the appeal, at least when I think in hindsight. But then, funnily enough, as I got into the teenage years, I started really changing my point of view about motorcycles. Growing up in New York, it's a different scene as far as like how traffic works, how the road works, and how frequent how frequently motorists are a part of life here. And so at some point they became more of a symbol of disturbance or annoyance rather than anything else. And it's just funny, like as I observe over the years, it hasn't rebounded. It hasn't turned the corner, so to speak. And I don't know if it'll ever turn the corner as far as like the concept being a cool concept to me again, because it's mostly overridden by the fact that they are like a big noise pollutant. What really makes a lot of noise in the environment, and especially unnecessary noise. You'd go like, well, airplanes are pretty loud. We got the subway with the trains above ground. When they come through, there's a whole bunch of noise. But motorcycles are up there. But the difference between airplanes and trains is you go, well, in terms of those modes of transportation, there's really no substitute. And so if that means of travel comes with this kind of noise, then it's a reasonable compromise. It feels like. But motorcycles, there's no reason to have this loud thing occur because someone's traveling by. Like imagine if somebody had, like super loud sneakers. Like plenty of people walk. Plenty of people. But why does it have to be the case when some of these people walk? Some of these people who chose to put on these loud sneakers every time, or loud shoes every time they take a step, it sounds like an explosion. Right? Imagine that. You could hear them 5 blocks away. Like, that wouldn't be acceptable. Because you go, well, the rest of the people are walking around and you don't got to hear every step they make. You don't have to have your attention drawn to them just because they're doing what? They're not doing anything special. They're not doing anything that warrants any attention whatsoever. They're just traveling just like everybody else. And so you got cars, and look, there are loud cars too, but they're like far and few in between. But motorcycles are just such an annoyance. They're loud, people like to rev them, and again, like they've pretty much lost all their appeal. And I think a part of it is just the kind of people who've adopted motorcycle culture. They're just obnoxious people. They have personalities that are probably very distinct from the group of people that initially adopted motorcycles, let's say some generations ago. So I think the personality of the people and their ethic about motorcycles is distinctly different. I'd like to see what people have to say about that. I haven't looked into it. I'm sure there's probably some threads on the internet about it. There's probably discussions out there where older generation of motorcyclists probably have made their views and opinions clear, or at least some of them. But they're extremely obnoxious. And a lot of people seem to agree. So that led me to thinking about, like, how come there are these areas where the democratic process has not been implemented, right? So I thought, and I'm like, if they were to survey all of the people in the neighborhood, or at least as many as they could, let's say you could survey 90% of the neighborhood, how many people would vote and say that the sound of the motorcycle, the noise that comes off of motorcycles, is something that they find disturbing and that they'd rather not deal with? They rather there be no motorcycle noise happening in their community. And I feel like, well, there's no way it would even be close. I would just love to see a vote about it. Then comes the whole matter of, well, how would it be addressed? If I'm correct, and the vast majority of people just really don't like these loud motorcycles, they find it to be a disturbance, they find it to be something that decreases their quality of living in the community, then begs the question, well, what would be the action taken if people were truly to embrace the idea of being democratic? And what's interesting about that whole chain of thought to me is that in society at this time, that's opportune. That's an option. That's something that can be acted upon. And it's a unique time because before, what would people do? Before they had access to mass communications, internet, things like that, what, it would be like a written ballot or something? It would be like, how would that even be approached? But now it seems like a fairly streamlined process. It's something that can be done. And I wonder how that would affect the state of society if people were willing to engage in more democratic processes. People usually lead that idea of majority rules to very few activities in life. Very few things do people seek to to indulge in that kind of thing or insert that. We'll think like voting, we'll think, politicians, government, but people don't tend to think about the more local or civil aspects of life where the democratic process is in dire need, I would think. So, anyways, another thing about road rules I found interesting. I haven't heard this kind of thing suggested before. It probably has been, but I really started thinking about IQ requirements for drivers. Like, who would reject to that, right? Like, the way driving is already approached, it's like it's not treated like it's a mandatory thing. It's not your right. It's not. It is a right to a degree, but it's something that you take upon yourself to access. Each person can more or less access this thing, but it's not something that is mandatory or that you can insist upon just receiving without applying yourself. So I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like a stretch to have an IQ requirement. And I thought, like, well, if that was already implemented, that would change everything. The way traffic works, the way a lot of the negative outcomes work when it comes to driving and what happens on the road probably would not happen. That probably would altogether significantly diminish if you just had people of a certain IQ requirement as the only people who are permitted to drive. But that led me to think about this, right? It's interesting that if all the people who have driver licenses were tested for their IQ, which I think more or less already there's probably enough information in the system somewhere to determine at least with some kind of approximation what the IQ is for these drivers, for all drivers. But if an official IQ test were given to all drivers, it would be interesting to see what percentage fits into what groups. And if it so happened that a lot of people are of average or lower than average IQ and they drive, that is fascinating because those people have still found a way to kind of get a huge share of that market though. They are still, they would be then a primary factor when it comes to that industry and to driving. And I haven't seen this comparison drawn before, but also that would kind of make driving and like the hospital or medical system comparable when people come up with the idea of like, hey, if nobody got sick, what use would there be for that industry, really, that field? It wouldn't thrive, it wouldn't be so profitable. Or let's say pharmaceuticals wouldn't be so profitable if people didn't need those products or those services. And you go, well, interestingly enough, especially if you try to implement an IQ requirement to drivers, that might hurt the bottom line. That might not be profitable. So, how funny is that? So, all of these disruptions, all of the negative, the fallout behind people who probably shouldn't have licenses having licenses might be in favor for money. All of that might be happening, and changes are not really implemented to prevent that because by the end of the day, it's just more profitable to have those people driving, right? But they might be causing accidents. They might be a large contributor to road rage. I mean, a whole host of negative things might be happening because these people are behind the wheel. But on the other hand, it might be the case that people with above average IQs, maybe they find themselves choosing to drive less often than people with lower IQs. And then maybe also the fact that they're aware of the presence of so many lower IQ drivers, maybe that causes them to make what would be the more intellectual decision of not even getting behind the wheel in the first place, right? Because maybe that is the higher IQ approach. So, anyways, those are two main things right there. A little riffing about what I call road rules.